Morning, church. Man, there's just nothing like a perfect cup of coffee to start your morning. And this morning I want to spend some time with you all in Ephesians and looking particularly at chapter 5. The first 3 chapters of Ephesians, Paul's kind of lining out what he's going to be talking about in the second half of the book. And he's kind of just trying to drive home the point of what Christ has really done for us. We talked about the fact that at one time we were lost. We were people who were in the world without hope and without mercy, but that God in His love for us has brought us into this family, and He has now shown us mercy. He has made us a people. We have a hope, and then now, and this is chapter 3, verses 8 through 10, it says that this is what we get to do, what we are a part of. Paul says, "To me, though I am the very least of all the saints, this grace was given, to preach to the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ, and to bring to light for everyone what is the plan of the mystery hidden for ages in God who created all things, so that through the church the manifold wisdom of God might be now made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places." That's a big deal. That's a huge thing that we, as part of the church, get to do, to display the manifold wisdom of God to rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. Once we were not a people, we had no hope, and now we get to do that. And that's pretty remarkable. And the first verse of chapter 4, Paul says this, though: "I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called." We've been called to something. We've been called to live a certain way. And in chapter 5, Paul gets pretty serious. In the first 2 verses, this is what we like to read, and I think we like to stop after this. And it says this: "Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." Now, that sounds like a great place to stop. I mean, hey, I'm pretty good at loving people, and we just want to stop at this point. But Paul continues, and he says this: "But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality, or of any kind of impurity or greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God." And we read that and we kind of think, we got to think, Paul, surely you're taking things maybe a little bit too far here. After all, we have forgiveness. So, it's okay. And it would be if it wasn't for what he says next. He says, "Let no one deceive you with empty words. For because of such things, God's wrath has come on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them." Church, I think we've allowed empty words to enter into our church. I think we've allowed empty words to allow us to live in a certain way that God never desired for us to live. Not because he doesn't like us, not because he doesn't love us, not because he doesn't just want us to do bad things. It's because ultimately those things drive us farther away from him and deeper into anxiety and frustration in our lives. Because after all, I mean, think about what Christ has done for us and then what he wants to do through us. That he wants to use us to display his manifold wisdom to the spiritual realm, to those who are in powers of authority in the spiritual realm. We tend to live in a day and age where we think that living for Christ means that he has kind of given us this free ticket, this free ride to live however we want, as long as we know we love him, and that's about it. And church, those are empty words that I think are wreaking havoc on our churches, and we need to take a stand here. We need to realize who it is that we've been called to be and whose we are. Because after all, in verses 8 through 10 it says this, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord, and live as children of light. For the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord." Church, once we were a people who were without hope and without mercy in the world, but now we have been given a hope and a mercy. We have been freed from sin and from its bondages that only drive us deeper into anxiety and despair. And we have an opportunity to no longer live in that darkness, but to live in light. And Paul is pleading with us to find out what it is that pleases God. Jumping down here, starting in verse 15, it says this, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and psalms from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." Paul is addressing, I believe, an issue that was happening in the church in Ephesus, but I think it's happening today. He's addressing this issue where we've listened to empty words and we've allowed it to just kind of creep in, and it's become just a hint, just a small bit of sin. And we've allowed it to creep in, and we've allowed it to bring about more anxiety and more frustration. And I think we've tried to mask that with maybe things like drugs and alcohol or pornography or other kinds of sins. And I think Paul's addressing that here when he talks about don't be drunk on wine, but instead be filled with the Spirit. You see, because just a hint of sexual immorality, of greed, or of impurity is only going to drive us more towards anxiety and despair, and we're going to try to figure out how we can mask those issues in our lives with things that aren't of God. And when we do that, we find ourselves deeper and deeper into despair and regret. But God is calling for us to be filled with His Spirit. And when we are filled with His Spirit, we seek to encourage each other to continue this, and through song and through encouragement and through love to one another. Church, I don't know how many of you would want to drink this coffee. And after seeing what was put into it, you might not want to touch it. Even though it was just a hint of toilet water. Just a hint can ruin the whole thing. In church, God saved us from a lot. He saved us from a life of darkness. He saved us from bondage to sin so that we can live free for Him. Church, if there's anybody, any of you guys who are dealing with what you may have thought is just a hint of sin, Church, I pray that you would reach out to somebody. Reach out to myself, Scott, Brian, one of the shepherds, or somebody in the church, and seek after God in prayer, seek after healing, seek after being filled with the Spirit. Love you, church. Hope you have a blessed day. Bye.